And I see we are now back streaming live on YouTube after that brief recess. So we will continue the meeting tonight. We're at 12.7, and that is the 2022 operational budget presentation. Mr. Armstrong, I'll turn it over to you and possibly Mr. Richard as well this evening, but please take it away.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I'm just going to share my screen and we'll start walking through that. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that now. Good. Okay, so this evening we're going to be talking about the budget timelines, fees and revenue, taxation, and the overall budget. So from a timeline perspective, we're at February 22nd. As I mentioned, we're talking about taxation and revenue. And then in our next presentation, which is the next item on the agenda, we'll be also looking at the capital and operational projects. So from a fees and revenue perspective, there's administrative fees, protective services, transportation, health and social services, parks and recreation, planning and development. So from an administrative revenue standpoint, we have OMPF, which is the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund. It's not expected to change in 2022, and we've already received our notice to say that it would not be changing. We expect marriages to rebound in the course of 2022, along with a small rebound in lottery. Dividends remain pretty much the same. Short-term in interest, which is interest on our long-term, or sorry, our high-interest savings account. We're expecting interest rates increases in the course of 2022, so expecting that to increase. Ceremonies, death certificates, oaths, all increasing slightly with the exception of death certificates. And then this year, we wouldn't have the COVID funding that we applied to last year's budget. One unique part of 2022 is the fact that we have an election, and so 20,000 will come from reserve and support those election costs. From a protective services standpoint, 2021 budget came in a little bit over on fire. It did better than budget. We expect about 124,500 in 2022. Police, there's an increase to the CSP grant, the Community Service Policing Grant, and so you're seeing that reflected there. Protective services, we started sharing a bylaw officer with Augusta in the course of 2021, and so that's reflected in the budget for 2022. And then building, we have some one-time cost recovery as we continue to support our neighbor in Merrickville Wolford. And then provincial offenses are expecting a rebound from approximately 20,000 in 2021 to an estimated 37,381. Transportation environmental, as we mentioned before, the OSIF grant basically more than doubled in the course of going into 2022. And we're putting a fair amount of that aside to be able to support the bridge project in 2023. Really not many changes to the other parts of it. Sidewalks, we did mention that there was some sidewalk work not completed in 2021 for replacements, and so we increased the budget by 22,000 from the expense side and bringing the amount from reserve of what wasn't spent in 2021 into 2022. From there, waste collection, just a reflection of the revenue amount for the provincial grant. Is recorded in there, so almost $5,900 for waste diversion.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
What did we sell for 70,000 bucks?
I believe that was 50,000 was the Zamboni, as well as we sold one of our sidewalk plows this year. So 50,000 was the Zamboni, and then the other two were made up of the sidewalk plow and the snow truck, the previous Salter that we had.
Thank you.
Matthew, now that you're interrupted, can I ask a question as well too, please?
Certainly.
Back on that building, the revenue for and 21 was 47,000 for building, and 2022 is 115. I know you explained the Merrickville chargeback, but that's a significant difference. So can I just get more of an understanding of that line item?
So in 2021, the budget was 47,000. In 2021, the actual was closer to the 145 that you're seeing there. That was made up of a couple of components, one being that we saw a fair amount of construction activity in the course of 2021, as well as we supported Merrickville Wolford for the entire year. So we're expecting, based on the number of projects that we have that are going through site plan control and they're on the plate, that we'll again have a fairly good year in terms of building permits, as well as the vacant building registry will be generating some revenue as well. And then we're also supporting Merrickville Wolford, continuing to do that through January, February, and March.
Great, thank you.
Okay. When we get to health and social services, the health center was sold in 2021, so no further rental revenue from that. And St. Lawrence Lodge, we receive a portion from the province of Ontario that's given to the city of Rockville. We receive a credit for that, for the debt that we hold. And there's a small interest amount. Because interest has gone down, then we're not expecting a great increase back to the 81,000, but we're being conservative at the 80,500. Parks and Recreation, not many changes here. With the rec programs, I think we were seeing that pickleball is certainly picking up and generating revenue. We talked this evening about further rentals of the Leo Boivin Community Center, so that's moving along well, and just a small increase for the library that's been there. The marina is offset by the expenses, so the expenses went up by approximately 14,000, and the revenue is there to offset it. That's also including a $79,000 contribution to reserves to help support the replacement of those docks. Planning and development, not many changes here. Slight change in just the ECDEV fees or revenue going down by 32,000. Committee of Adjustment down by 1,250, but planning up by 1,500. So overall, our 2021 budget for fees and revenue was 3.385 million. Our projection for 2021 is approximately just shy of 3.6 million. And for 2022, it's just shy of 3.8 million. The vast majority of that $400,000 increase is in the increase to OSIF. And then we're happy to mention that we're also able to recoup a lot of the decreases that we saw in the 2021 budget that was then there supported by COVID, that were some of those revenue lines are starting to return back to their pre-COVID numbers, and so that's moving in the right direction. So from a property taxation perspective, we're going to talk about the assessment changes year over year, tax ratios, and taxes by property class. So there is no assessment change again in 2022. You'll remember 2013 through 2016 were based on the 2012 current value assessment. 2017 through what was planned to be 2020 was based on the 2016. However, in 2021, when it was to be reassessed based on 2020, that didn't occur due to the pandemic. And we have been told that it will not happen again for 2022. So therefore, the assessments that are still on, that we base property taxes on, are still based on 2016 current values. So our total assessment from 2021 and 2022 does not change. There's no natural increase due to property values increasing. And so therefore the tax ratios, if there's no change in the overall balance of taxes, then there's no need to readjust the ratios because it would remain the same. So we worked towards this, and a 2.85% increase in the municipal portion of taxes would have a net result of $3.8 million in the municipal property taxes being generated. We know that education rates are not going to change from the 2021 amounts. So a 2.85% increase on municipal property taxes results in a 2.44% increase overall. So for the median household, and medians are also, or single family home means that it's the midway point, that half the number of properties are above and half the number of properties are below. The amount for Prescott for 2021 and 2022 was $153,000. Because there's no current value change, then the 2.85% increase results in a change of $60.11, or 2.57%. For a residential condominium building, so something similar to a multi-residential building, would see an increase of $59.71, or 2.57%. Small office space, which is commercial, is 2.13, and then a standard industrial property is 2.29%. So that takes us through the fees, the revenue, property taxes, and now we're going to take a look at the budget overview as well as the updates. So fees and revenue, we talked about a moment ago, being the nearly $3.8 million. The election I set out in a separate line so that we can clearly delineate that from year over year. Property taxation, if it was at 2.85%, would generate $5.838 million. And then property in lieu, as well as supplemental property taxes, is $412,000. We talked about earlier in the evening, supporting the river route transit to the tune of $31,500. So that was included here as well. If that hadn't been passed, then obviously it would be removed. And then we took a look from an expense perspective. So at February 7th, we were at 9.9 million, and that was not including water and wastewater. A 1% property tax increase dedicated to the infrastructure reserve is $56,765. Joint services, based on their most recent draft budget, it's an increase of almost 3.3% versus the 2% that we put in. So updating that number as well. There's two offsets that we saw. One is a new animal control provider. Currently spend approximately $19,000 a year on our current animal control provider, and we believe we can cut that by a little bit more than half by moving to a new one. The other part is the integrity commissioner. Every year we put $10,000 in the operating budget for integrity commissioner if a complaint was to be received. What I'm recommending in this budget is take the amount that wasn't spent in 2021, move it to a reserve so it's permanently there, and then we wouldn't have to include it in the yearly budget and only have to replenish it if it is used. From there, the community policing grant, I mentioned that it had gone up, and so the offsetting expense for that is there as well. St. Lawrence Lodge, instead of being 2%, was closer to the 9%. I believe Councillor Young mentioned that at our last meeting. And really it has more to do with the number of resident days there were that were attributable to Prescott. Normally we run about 5 on average patients of the total. And in the course of 2021, I believe it was closer to 9 on average. And so that had a significant impact on increasing the overall levy. River Route Transit, mentioned earlier that we're moving that in. If it wasn't approved, then we would have not moved it. And then the election funding by the reserve is there as well. So you can now see that revenue and expenses both equal $10,073,535, and that's with a 2.85% property tax increase, inclusive of the 1% dedicated to infrastructure. Water and wastewater are balanced at 2.939 million, and that's with a 2% increase effective July 1st, which equates to a 1% increase across the entire year. that's where we are at this moment. Our next meeting on March 7th, we would take a look at the operational and project budget and measure it against the strategic plan as well as the service delivery review to see how they align and make sure that we've put our resources where we were intending on focusing in those two documents. I'm just going to end the slideshow now and I'll stop sharing my screen so that can gain any feedback there might be as we're moving towards the end of the budgeting process.
Thanks, Matt. Open it up for any additional comments, questions from members of council this evening. Councilor McConnell, please.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. Actually, I have a question for Ray, if I could ask that through you in regards to St. Lawrence Lodge. As you know, I was on the board of St. Lawrence Lodge for 2 terms. Ray is on this term. The provincial government, given the COVID problems that we have had and that the seniors' homes have suffered, we've been hearing a lot and reading a lot how they're going to require more hourly attention per resident, how they were going to require more of this, more of that. My experience on the board, though, is the government is very good at requiring these things, but they're not so good at forking over the cash to pay for them. Is there any indication that these things may be required and that they're not going to pay for it, that it may be up to the lodge to actually pay for it, and essentially that comes down to us?
Out of the blue, back in November, they sent us a check for $160,000. And they're sending that check monthly now. The calculation to the 160 is 15 minutes more time per resident for the year. So that was a $2 million bonus, unexpected revenue that went towards the budget. And we still had to come up with a 3.3% increase in the overall budget. COVID designated expenses may be finished. We're not sure, but there may be more. There may also be more coming designated as COVID. But this $160,000 was probably the attempt to eliminate some of the COVID down the road.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you both for that question and for that answer. Any other comments, questions on this portion of the budget presentation this evening? Seeing nothing further, so I think we can move along to 12.8.
Okay. So next, what we're going to go through is project prioritization. And again, looking through it from the perspective of where we are right now, and then just getting any feedback and comments. So hopefully everyone can see that. So capital projects previously approved, obviously the recreation complex that we're moving through to be completed in 2023. Dibbled Street East from Van Conant to Edward Street will occur in 2022. Town hall renovations, we just reviewed the plans at our last meeting and working towards those drawings to be completed. Break wall at the at the water treatment plant, reviewing the options, solar light installation. We see that being completed in 2022. Digital signage, that's pending the outcome of wayfinding study. Roofing structure on the C-cans could be completed this year, as well as the stone break wall areas. adding additional storage to those. So that comes to a total of 20.9 million that we've already previously approved. Operating projects previously approved downtown beautification plan to be completed this year. Official plan review that's ongoing and slated for completion. The sidewalk south of King Street at the west end of the Coast Guard building slated for completion this year. Taking a look at the base of Center Street and the Deepwater Dock area and addressing that. What we currently see is the washout. The waterfront Prescott sign, reviewing the options for that. Town signage and wayfinding strategy to be completed this year. Accessible sidewalk on the south end of George Street to link to the waterfront trail. We're looking out for that as well. And then the trees for the downtown, continuing that as part of the downtown beautification plan. So 2022 projects that we've approved as part of the process so far. The Edward Street Overpass Rehabilitation Project will be designed and tendered this year, work to be completed next year. Purchase of the rescue pumper. So that's specification is in development, and we'll come back when we're ready to go to tender on that. The replacement of G&H dock that we approved, I believe, at our last meeting as well. So other capital projects that we have on the list for 2022 is the one-ton truck with dump box, which was approved this evening. The lighthouse pop-up shop improvements, outdoor patio structure, and pop-up sheds for Riverwalk Village is part of a grant application that we should hear from fairly shortly. Fire department replacement gear, that's an ongoing project that we put 30,000 aside each year for, and the swing blade for the new plow with $20,000, and that's to help for the functionality of the new snow plow that we purchased late last year, the previous year. So in terms of operational projects, we also have a Mine Main Street Community Activator Fund grant application that we're waiting to find out about. Recreational lending library in Centennial Park or the Marina. That could be supported by, we were previously putting $25,000 a year aside for splash pad / dog park. We could use a portion of that to kind of bring our rec lending library to fruition and bring it to full publication. The play structure deficiencies, that's an ongoing project that we support each year. The CB radios for the operations equipment could be paid for by the Public Works Reserve. The Brockville General Hospital donation, this would be the 5th out of 10 years that we could continue with that. And then allocating the remainder of the modernization funding that is left over to economic development initiatives. It wouldn't be a carte blanche approval. It would be that we would come back in the course of this year, but being able to say that we do have that funding fully allocated, so that if there's another round of funding, we would be able to apply for it. And that was certainly what we saw in the last round of funding, is that if you hadn't fully allocated your modernization funding, then you weren't able to apply for further funding. So that's kind of taking everything that we've spent so far and allocated, and then whatever's left over we put towards economic development initiatives, but all of those would be approved by council as we move forward. So project funding, the 2022 priority projects, from the ones that have been approved as well as the ones that we just talked about a moment ago, comes to just shy of 2.7 million. OSIF bridge funding would support 507 of that. The revitalization community fund grants that we're waiting to hear about is 80,000. My Main Street is about 80,000. Debt for the rescue pumper is about 900. And then $1.1 million coming from reserves. So of all of the projects that are ongoing, previously approved, as well as the $2.7 million that we have in the project list for 2022, we have on the books about $23.8 million in capital and operational projects at this point. So each year, this, I have to admit, is a little small, but it was to answer a question that Councillor Young asked at our previous meeting is, what do we do with all that money that we put into reserve? And so you can see that of the $8.5 million that would be going towards reserve, we would be, $1.8 million. We would also be spending $1.8 million out of this for a number of projects, including all of those that we identified this evening. So again, on March 7th, we would come back, take a look at the budget alignment for projects to see whether it aligns with the strategic plan and the service delivery review. And but I'm more than happy to take any feedback that there currently is, so that we can prepare for that March 7th presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. So I'll open it up for comments, questions on this budget presentation this evening. Anybody? Got a couple myself. I just wanted to ask about the arena. Obviously that 19.1 that's in there. One thing we haven't discussed, we haven't brought back in a little while now, is the status of the ball fields, soccer fields back there. Are we still on target for bringing those back to council in the not too distant future and ensuring that they're constructed? I'm assuming the time frame they're going to be done concurrently with the building itself.
Absolutely. So we would see that bringing that to council at the second meeting in March. So I believe it's the March 21st meeting, so that we can give out some preliminary ideas, get some feedback, and then hopefully have that solidified in April and send it out to tender so that we can have it completed this year and next. Great.
Thank you very much for that. A couple other, just on the break wall down at the power dock, the 250 reviewing options for repairs. That's just been hanging around a long time now. No criticism to anyone, because that's like a generational thing where that's needed to be repaired for quite a number of years. And I actually don't see it getting any worse, which is actually good, but it was in decrepit shape back when we first started really looking at this. So there's kind of a 6 of one, half dozen of the other in that one. But I just wonder, like, I mean, are we anticipating, I mean, we see reviewing options on that, the digital signage. There are a couple of things here that have hung around for a while, but particularly that break wall issue, because that is something that would be nice to take care of before it finally does kind of give way. There's a lot of issues underneath it. So are we, for the options, can you just give us a little more information on the options, Matt?
Certainly. So the difficulty at this moment is trying to find an engineer with that specialty to be able to do the design and development work. So we're continuing to work with that. We're also working with and discussing what possible options there are just with those that actually do the work. So if they're able to do the work and do the design, then that certainly helps us as well. But that's currently where we're at. It's we see that the surface, there's a lot of issues with the surface. We haven't seen a lot of issues with the part that's below the water, and so we're trying to just review exactly the level of design that needs to go into it, and make sure that whatever we do come up with an option, it's achievable from a practical standpoint by those that would actually be doing the work.
Okay. Yeah, I've always been concerned about that one, what the end cost might be, because even I think we had 250 on that. Lee, Ray, didn't we have that number on there a long time ago for that? I think that's just been a best guess, and it wouldn't shock me if it's a hell of a lot more than that when we finally get somebody that can do the work. So that's just going to be something that I think we're going to have to bite the bullet on it at some point, ourselves or a future council. I just had, on some of the beach, I mentioned this before, but I just want to make sure it's tracked. We do have on page 70 of 75 there, we've got the parquettes, the banner along Coast Guard property beach. I mean, that's great that we've applied for the applications there, but particularly on the beach and the different issues there, that banner was approved. I thought we approved that last year, and now it's great that hopefully we can get some grant funding for it. But I just would want to make sure again that if we don't get the grant funding, we take a good look at that, because to me that really needs to be done, along with some other basic things that still need to be done at the beach. We did some good stuff last year at Centennial Park. It's a beautiful park overall, some amazing amenities. The one thing I think we are still missing, though, is dressing it up along the Coast Guard side. And I know staff is looking at that. And also, and Matt, we have talked about this, and I've talked about it here, buoys to mark out the swimming area, because we do have a number of motorized watercraft coming by there very closely. It seems to be more all the time, and people do swim out farther now because it actually is a fairly shallow bay now with the sand that's been washed in over the years. So that's something that I hope we're going to look at as well. And I think we are going to, from what we've discussed. That's more of an operational thing than pure budget, but pure project. But I did want to mention that the other comment is on that recreation lending library, and I just wonder if we should. We don't have a full-on recreation reserve, do we?
I don't think so. I think eventually that Splashback Dog Park Reserve could turn into a recreation reserve.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Rather than designate it for any specific projects, we just have one recreation reserve, and we try to keep up with it and make sure that we've got we're using that each year for some of these projects, so we know where the money's coming from rather than to kind of find it. So no, that was my only comment. And just on the total reserves, and this is probably an impossible question to ask. We've always been told through the audits that our reserves are actually quite healthy, especially for the size of the municipality. Are we still there? I mean, what was it, 6.9 million in the total reserves? Is it a fair comment to say we're still quite healthy in the overall reserves? We're taking out, but we're replenishing on a pretty healthy basis as well?
So certainly, I think as we continue to seek ways to put money aside, and the yearly 1% dedicated to infrastructure is critically important to be able to continue that, so that we are able to take on those projects. So prime example is the bridge project through the OSIF funding, as well as the 1% we're putting aside for dedicated infrastructure, that we're actually able to pay for that $1 million project in the course of 2 years, or a little over 2 years, without having to incur debt. So I think really, when you take a look at the amount of reserves that we have, which is continuing to be applied towards projects that are key to infrastructure, as well as rejuvenating the infrastructure that we have, I think is key, but also making sure that we're putting enough away each year to be able to purchase a vehicle if we need to without having to incur debt, those types of things. And that is critically important, that we're not running so close to our maximum when it comes to what we put into reserve versus what we take out, that we're not able to adjust and respond as things arise, either during the year or between budget years. And so that is certainly something that we've been looking forward to. The OSIF money certainly helps. And so we're very appreciative of that from the government, because once we're done the bridge project in 2023, we can now redirect that $250,000 towards some other project, which is of critical importance. So I think that for me is that we're continuing to build those contributions so that we can continue to do the work that council directs us, and that residents really want to see us maintain as well as grow as a community.
Great, thanks very much, Matt. The only comment I would have to leave off from my own point of view tonight is in our next steps. And I know this isn't the be all and end all comparing to other municipalities, but I'd love to see just a cheat sheet of comparators on where we are with, as far as we can go with that, because it's always good for developers. It's good to attract people and make sure that, and of course it's good for our council as well, because if we're going to pass, whether it's 2.85 or whatever the number is, it'd be good to be able to tell people that no, like we're in line with what other municipalities are doing. We're doing the best we can to cut costs and deliver the most effective form of municipal government we can. But it's good to have a few numbers behind us just to back that up. So before we finalize the budget this year, I'd love to see just some comparators. I know we have a number of them. They've been presented in the past, but I would appreciate seeing some of that. And I think the rest of council would as well, because that's the one question we always get. Why don't we do X like Brockville does, or Edwardsburg Cardinal, or whatever? So it's good to be able to have those answers, even though it's not a one size fits all budget, of course, for municipal government. That's all I've got for today. Anybody else have anything else on the budget before we leave off until March 7th? Everybody good? Oh, Councilor McConnell, please.
Thanks, Mayor. Just going back to the break wall at the water treatment plant for a brief moment. I walk through there on a regular basis, and I don't know if you remember that huge windstorm we had several weeks ago. That yard, and keep in mind, at this time of year, the water is as low as it gets. With that windstorm, that entire yard was awash in debris with the waves that were coming over the top of it. The break wall that's there now, as you mentioned, it's in terrible shape. It wasn't too bad a shape when I was a kid, but that's been added on to once before. So it's an add-on in addition to what's already there. So that kind of complicates things. But in my opinion, that break wall should be 2 feet higher than it normally, or than it is right now, to accommodate high water and accommodate those waves. If you're going to do that, though, you run the risk of trapping water behind that if we do have high water. So you have to look at installing some kind of a drain from that area into the water again, which is an added cost. And I think the cement break wall that's there needs to be continued in some sort all the way down to in front of the parking lot for the boat ramp, because the area from the west end of the boat ramp parking lot to, well, fairly on into in front of the water treatment plant at high water was completely underwater, was completely submerged. And there are outlets there from the water treatment plant that we can't afford to have underwater. So as you mentioned, the $250,000 that we have towards that break wall may not be anywhere near enough. It wouldn't surprise me if in order to do a decent job on that, we would spend twice that amount of money. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent points there. I'm concerned we're going to have to reconstruct a good chunk of that area, and we've also got the water intake pipe right there as well. And there's a lot of potential engineering that's going to need to be done before we come up with a final number. And on some of the aesthetics too, we always talked about making sure that the path actually connects around there, because in the winter time and even in the summers, because we've got a lot of interesting animals digging burrows and things under there. It's always been a bit of a treacherous spot to walk through at times. So that's something we'd want to probably look at as well. But anyways, that's a really good points, because there's going to have to be a real big assessment of that whole area, and the engineering could reveal some added complications. So that's why I asked tonight, because I wonder if that's one that we're going to be able to resolve this year, at least not without any real surprises money-wise. Any other comments on the budget tonight? Okay, I think we're good. Thanks, everyone. And thanks again, Matthew and staff, for bringing all that to us. And we'll be back to that on March 7th. So moving along tonight, we're at item 13, resolutions, none tonight. 14, no bylaws either. 15, new business. Any member of council have any new business to discuss tonight? Seeing none. 16, notices of motion. Any member of council have a notice of motion to present this evening? Seeing none. 17, mayor's proclamations, nothing tonight. 18, closed session. We do have a couple items under the closed session portion of the agenda this evening. Recommendation reads that council move into closed session at 8:27 p.m. to discuss matters pertaining to 18.1, approval of closed session minutes from our last closed session, of course, and 18.2, purchase and sale. That's covered under section 239(2)(c) of the Municipal Act. Of course, this involves a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. And we're also recommending that the CAO, treasurer, clerk, interim director of operations, deputy clerk, and economic development officer remain in the room. Could I ask for a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Shankar. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor? Motion is carried. We will be going into closed session now for anyone watching on YouTube, and we'll be back momentarily.